Well, Sabrina, thank you for being with us. Can you give us a self-introduction?
Sure. My name is Sabrina Gasper. I am a longtime pharmaceutical, both individual contributor and manager of teams. I am battling a horrific case of allergies, which has mimicked COVID, so forgive me if I cough in your ears, which I will try not to. I've spent my time, as I mentioned, as an individual contributor, working my way up to managing teams, and I think one of the crowning achievements, or one of the things that I'm most proud of, is the creation of the Health Economics and Outcomes Research Group for the Animal Health Division at Pfizer Animal Health. It was the first of its kind in the animal health industry, and the team lives on despite my leaving the organization sometime in 2015. And I think what I'm most proud of is the flexibility that it took in applying principles that were common in human health to animal health, and then influencing an industry as well as a company to consider the value proposition in a slightly different way. So let me move on to the presentation. I'll talk more about my journey during the presentation as well. But I do want to give a shout out to my colleagues here and the previous speakers. Every single one of you have touched on work-life balance in some form or fashion, whether it was being authentic in your leadership role or being resilient when facing obstacles, or Tricia, when you talked about how employees are gaining the upper hand in terms of negotiating for what makes working and living possible. And I think that I'm really lucky in that I get to build on your presentations and also talk a little bit more about how to achieve a work-life balance, which I think everyone has articulated here as well. So what I'm going to talk about is it a myth or is it real? And I know that, and if we move to the next slide, I know that it's been in vogue for a long time, and we have lots of literature out there on, on work-life balance from folks like Sheryl Sandberg and her book about leaning in, from Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who has 7 children and has managed to reach the pinnacle of her career. I think what these perspectives, though, fail to mention is something that we just talked about in terms of COVID and careers, is that when you have a lot of money and you have a lot of resources, it is not easy, but it is easier to balance work and life because you have an army at work helping you and you have an army at home helping you. I think what COVID laid bare was that the vast majority of us don't have that army at home. We may have an army at work who manages, when we manage teams and deliverables and things like that, but we don't have an army at home picking up the pieces and stepping in and making sure that dinner's on the table, kids' homework is done, they're driven to their various activities. That often lands on the parents, wives, mothers and fathers, as well as nannies and other help. And I think what COVID laid bare was that it really was a collision of the personal and professional, and it peeled back the lid on just how complicated working and one's personal life can be. I think one of the things that I certainly learned was that it was much easier to keep personal and professional separate when there's childcare and little ones go off to school and we go off to the office, and we were somewhat able to keep things separate, but that really disappeared when everyone was at home and we were all still trying to maintain our lives as it was pre-COVID. So for today, I'm going to touch briefly on what is the dictionary definition of work-life balance, and then discuss some practical steps that can make life a little easier for everyone. I know that these are probably obvious, and again, these are things that were mentioned by our previous speakers, but they bear repeating and absorbing as part of our DNA. But I'll also talk a little bit about me before we dive in. As I mentioned, I'm a longtime pharma executive. I am a mother of 4. My children are 18, 20, 21, and 24. I have to remember that. So I'm at the tail end of juggling all the things that come with having children, but literally for the last 25 years, I've been in the thick of it. Traveling and working long hours was always part of my job, and at times the child care that we had was absolutely terrific. I mean, hands down, really, really good, high-quality child care. And sometimes it was adequate, and sometimes it was downright awful. And those were the times when it really became clear that managing both working and home and the children was difficult. I have to say that my army was an army of one at home. I have a husband who is truly a partner. He didn't do the typical, I'll watch the kids on a Saturday afternoon while you go get your nails done. He was actively engaged, and because I traveled, very often a single parent. And the joke in our house was that when Dad was on deck, every meal began with rice. It was rice and then some, and it became a family joke, and it became something that we all bonded over, and something that my husband was quite proud of, that he was able to put food on the table, get them out to school, manage the homework, and he did it without me. I think one of the panelists mentioned that when husbands leave work or fathers leave work early to watch a softball game or a baseball game or a hockey game or a dance recital, they're seen as real heroes and stepping up. But when moms do it, there's a lot of grousing. And I have to confess that, when I was traveling and my husband was home with the 4 children by himself, I got many comments at how wonderful he was and what a hero he was. But I got nothing when he was traveling and I was home alone with 4 small children trying to get dinner on the table with a screaming baby. So I think the disconnect and the double standard is still alive, even post-COVID and even post more women in the workforce and more women in management. But we're going to work to overturn that as well. If you want to go to the next slide, that would be great. So why are we looking for a work-life balance? I really do believe that it's fundamental to our existence. We are more than our jobs. We're more than our families. And there is an inherent drive to find an equilibrium between the two. In a perfect world, if we drew a Venn diagram of work and life, there would be some overlap. But we all know that there is mostly overlap between the two, and it's how we manage that overlap and how that overlap impacts both aspects of our lives that it becomes very important. I also think that, I think there's also, everyone in the audience has sat at the pediatrician's office desperately trying to finish a call before a kid's appointment, or how many of us have sat in a car on the computer or phone tying up loose ends while keeping an eye on the soccer game. And to me, that's the ultimate overlap. It's really trying to do 2 things at the same time that are essentially separate. And it's how we manage that and how we keep our sanity, our family's sanity, and meet the demands of work all at the same time that becomes the challenge. It's the overlap, as I mentioned, that creates the tension. And our drive to find that equilibrium is what we call work-life balance, and finding the place where we can do both without sacrificing too much of either. Is it possible? And I ask myself that all the time over the last 25 years when I was raising, along with my husband, 4 children, both of us trying to have careers, and at the same time trying to be present with our children. I do think it's possible, but I think we have to take the long view. It's not 50-50 each day. Rather, it's 50-50 over a longer period of time. Sometimes work will take precedence, sometimes family will take precedence, or other personal commitments will be the most important. And I think there were some comments around or points made around caring for family, caring for elderly parents. I think the demands on all of us who are the sandwich generation, meaning those of us that have children still at home and elderly parents, are increasing. And it's how we navigate that, and it's how we take the long view of what is more important at that moment is the important part of work-life balance. I do think it does shake out in the end. I think at the end of one's career or at the end of one's raising family, I think it is possible to take a step back and say, I did the best I could. I worked it out. I balanced what I needed to balance. I was there when I needed to be. And I think that's the most important thing to remember, is making sure you're present for what's important to you as not only a leader in an organization or an employee in an organization, but also as a parent or family member or caregiver. It's making sure that you're doing what's right for you at that time. And I can say that over my career, there were times when work was the primary focus, and the family took a back seat. And there were times when I stayed in place in my job so that I could focus on my family. And I remember drawing those boundaries, and I'll talk a little bit about boundaries later, but I remember sitting down with my children when they were all in grade school and talking with them about what I was able to do given my demands, the demands on me at work. And in my children's grade school, each grade had a big field trip at the end of the year. And I sat down with them and I said, I can go on one of your field trips, one from kindergarten to 5th grade. I cannot commit to 4 field trips per year, per kid, per grade. It's just not going to work. So I asked them to tell me what field trip they wanted me to go on, and I would move heaven and earth to go on that field trip. And I think what I did there was explain to them that not only was my job important because it put food on the table and paid the mortgage, but they were important, and I was willing to carve out time that was undeletable on a calendar for them. And I stuck to it. I was able to go on the field trips with them. It was important for me to be participating in those events with them, but it was also important to them that I could put work aside and show up and be present for something that was important for them. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm going to move into the practical for the next bit of the conversation. Everyone knows that work-life balance is about prioritizing, or really life is about prioritizing, right? Sometimes we prioritize work, sometimes we prioritize family, sometimes we'll prioritize a project over another project because that's what the business demands. And I think the best rule I can say is use the 80-20 rule to guide your priority setting. And be ruthless in evaluating what is critical and focus only on that, both at work and at home. Work, it was what are the projects that are going to deliver the most bang to the business, and focus on getting that done because that's what's going to drive revenue, it'll drive sales, it will drive positioning of the brands that we were supporting, and it will drive ultimately business success. And when focusing on home, I will confess to a mountain of dust bunnies. I'm not the best housekeeper. I outsourced housekeeping. I hired someone to do the jobs that I wasn't happy doing or didn't want to do or didn't want to spend my time doing. I'm right now sitting in my office looking at my son's laundry basket, which has not been moved from my office where I folded it to his room where he needs to put it away. And, there are times when my head would explode and I would demand that it be done. And then there are other times when I'm just thinking, you know what, if he lives out of a laundry basket, he's still going to college, he's still going to get a job, and he's still going to be successful. Whether he puts his laundry away or not is really not an issue. So it's a little bit of pick your battles, both at work and both at home. And if you can live with chaos and clutter, then that's great. If you need a little bit of a neater house, and figure out how that's going to happen without wear and tear on you and wear and tear on the family. I also think it's really important to be flexible. Just because you prioritize both sides of your life, you're going to have to reprioritize. So again, at work, sometimes what comes up as a priority in January isn't a priority in August. And you have to be flexible. You have to guide your teams to see how the priorities have changed, why we need to maybe shift our focus, shift our resources, and help them connect the dots as much as you can see that vision for the company. And then the teams often fall in line when they begin to see the bigger picture and understand why the change is happening. And again, the same thing at home. There were times when it was really, really important that I have a clean house for whatever reason, and I would focus on that. And then there were times when it's gone to hell in a handbasket and we're shifting piles of papers from one flat surface to another to find a flat surface to work on. So again, just be mindful of that and be careful of that, and make sure that you're communicating why things are shifting and why what was important a month ago may not be important now, because I think that just keeps everybody on the same page. It does boil down to communication and making sure that the communication is as fulsome as it can be. Can you hear me? My earbuds just died.
Yes, you sound great.
Okay. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. I think the other thing that's critically important to manage work-life balance, or to achieve work-life balance, is something that everybody has spoken to a little bit. It is the boundaries, and setting boundaries is really important. And one of the things at work that really helps is making sure that you're clear on when you're available. And one of the things I did was be available Monday through Friday if I had to be from 8 to 8. That doesn't mean I was on the phone all the time, but I was equally happy to commit to post 5 o'clock if I needed to talk to a colleague on the West Coast, and it made time sense for us to talk post 5 o'clock. But I was also equally clear that I was not available on the weekends unless the world was caving in. And then where I was sat in the pharmaceutical world, the world never caved in on a Saturday or Sunday. So it was pretty easy to stick to that. But then again, stick to it. So in my case, I didn't answer email after 8 o'clock. I didn't agree to conference calls before or after 8, or unless it was absolutely critical or necessary. And I made a decision, or, I was very sparing. I used that criteria very sparingly. Don't answer or send emails on the weekends, because if you say you're not available and then all of a sudden you're answering and sending emails, then it's just confusing and you're setting yourself up for issues down the road around availability. When you want to disengage, it becomes harder if you've created a scenario where you're happy to engage or happy to answer emails on the weekends. Provide clear guidance on what are the boundaries that work for you, and then prioritize that guidance. And then you can set. You as a leader, you've also established that your team can set boundaries. So if you say, I don't expect you to answer an email on the weekend, don't send them an email, because they'll think that you need them to answer. I mean, very tactical, very specific, but at the end of the day, it is important to model the behavior that you set for yourself, but also that you want the team to set. And I think, it is fair to say that the vast majority of us are not working in positions or industries where 24-hour access is required. So create those boundaries and stick to them that work for you. I think the other thing to remember, though, is that there will be times when those boundaries are violated, but it should be clear why they are, and it should be rare. Next slide, please. So this is all about consistency, and I put this picture up here of the Navy baseball player. Part of it is because I have two children who have graduated from the Naval Academy, and one who is going. My fourth is decidedly not interested in the military and is in school in Scotland. So it's equally cool, really, when you talk about what the kids are doing. But one thing that the Navy has taught my children, and taught me from them, is the value of consistency. Consistency in approach to a problem, consistency in solving the problem, and consistency in routine, which means that the expectations are clear. People know what to expect from you as a leader. They know what to expect from you as an employee. They know what to expect from you as a parent if you're consistent in the messaging. And you try and achieve that consistency through, again, setting boundaries, being clear on what you're willing to step up and do, what you're asking other people to step up and do, and then reinforcing that consistency and those boundaries on a daily basis. I think one of the things that helped me navigate my children's childhood when I was traveling so much and engaged with work is being consistent about when I was home and sticking to that, so that I took the 5:30 train home. I was home for dinner pretty much every single night. It was clear when I wasn't, and I told them ahead of time. And it meant that they could wrap their heads around when I was home and when I wasn't, and they knew that I would stick to those boundaries and stick to that consistency. And it made their lives more stable. It made our lives more predictable, and it carved out time that was just for us. I mean, one of the rules that we had was no friends at dinner during the week, because that was our time, and that the other inviolate rule was that Saturday lunch was always the family. We always went out, we always had a pizza, but it was just the family. And it was really one of those consistent things that we did that built our family and made us really tight and really strong. Next slide, please. I think the other piece that is really, really important is to unplug, and I know that several of our speakers have already alluded to that, and this comes in the form of time for yourself, whether it's the run in the morning, the exercise after work, or the vacation, or just disappearing into a novel or even a night out with friends. It is really, really important to unplug. And that unplug doesn't have to be completely disengaged from the world, but it means that it's time when you're not focused on the crisis du jour. It's time when you're taking the opportunity to reflect on what's going on in your life, talking it over with friends, spending time by yourself to recharge the batteries. And I think for those of us that are somewhat introverted, this is really, really important because most of our jobs we spend engaged with people every single day, every minute of the day. And it is very hard for introverts to find the psychic energy to keep that going. And those of us that are introverts need that time to unplug, to recharge the batteries, to spend time regrouping on our own in a much quieter, much maybe less frenetic environment. So that is something that I think everybody needs to focus on and make sure that you find that time and find something that you like to do. For me, it's running. If I don't get my run or my swim in every day, I feel kind of out of sorts. But for others, it's reading, knitting, sewing. My daughter dances. She's a very accomplished ballet dancer, and for her, that's her unplugged time. My other daughter runs as well, and if she doesn't run, she's a little on edge. She's, not quite herself. So it is taking the time to do these things that is really important and making sure that you're doing it for yourself. And then I think we're up to the couple of, next slide, please, or the last couple of slides. One of the things I learned in a program called the Corporate Athlete that I did with the team that I worked with at Pfizer Animal Health was that, our lives are really busy. Our lives are very stressful. We're getting pressured from all sides in terms of work deliverables, family obligations, things like that. But if you can find it in yourself to be present, even in the icky bits, in the unpleasant conversations, even when, you might be getting a call from your kid's school that they're in detention for something or other, being present in that conversation and being present in that, even in the icky bits, in the good bits, means that you're really engaged in what's happening. And that is really, really important. And it brings meaning to one's life. It brings meaning to one's encounters. And it means that the engagement is real. Even if it's unpleasant or difficult, it's real. And I think that, again, helps us all achieve that work-life balance by being present in both aspects of our lives, or all aspects of our lives, means that we're really living our lives rather than punching the clock or marking time or marking the calendar or waiting for the calendar the time to hit 5 o'clock when we can leave the office. By being present, you're getting to live your life, engage in your life, and really experience life in all of its true meaning. So with that, I'll move to the last slide. And I think, I hope this gives a little bit of perspective on trying to achieve that elusive balance between work and life. It is possible. It is hard, and I think it's possible when we take the long view, or as I think it was Maria Shriver said, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time. And I really do think that's true. By taking the long view, by focusing on what's important now, and also what are the challenges that we're facing, and being engaged, being present, setting boundaries, we can find that balance where we feel like we're not really shortchanging either side of our lives. And as I said, it is possible. And I always say it's when younger colleagues ask me if it's possible, I say yes-ish. You have to be ruthless in what you're trying to achieve. You have to be careful in setting those boundaries, and you have to stick to those boundaries. And honestly, have some fun. Life is fun. Work is fun. And really find the pleasure in what you're doing every day, all the time. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Shelley.
All right, well, thank you so much for that presentation. So we've got a couple of questions that have come in. So our first question, I think I'll just go with this one question, and then we'll ask you for some final words. So this question came from Sara, and Sara said, before COVID, I was achieving a work-life balance. I had a hard stop at 4, no work on the weekends. But now that I'm working from home, everything has been blurred. How do I reestablish that work-life balance?
Sara, that's a really good question. And I think that's something that COVID has really rammed home, is that when working from home, the life the lifelines blur. And I did certainly find myself in that situation where I was working all the time because my office was literally down the stairs, at the bottom of the stairs. It comes back to setting boundaries, and I think one has to be very, very clear, not only with yourself and your family, but also with your colleagues about what is it you're willing to do. And it may be that you do have to stretch those hours of availability because the commute is gone, right? You don't have the hour commute from your home to your office. So that maybe that can be filled, you can use that time, not all of it, but some of it for work when, so that you can stretch those hours just a little bit. But I think the most important thing is to be ruthless about when you stop, right? Stopping at a time, letting people know when you can't take meetings or after which time you're not available, and block your calendar. And no questions asked. Just put on your calendar no meetings, and don't let anyone schedule over them, and don't accept meetings during those times. Because again, it's going back to that being consistent and setting boundaries. If you block your calendar but you accept a meeting, then the block becomes useless. So block your calendar if you want to stop your meetings at 4 o'clock to have, clean up email, catch up on some technical or scientific or whatever reading is relevant to your particular business, or think through what you need to do, for the next day, or that all important just thinking time, right? I mean, we don't have a lot of time in our days to think about stuff. So block your calendar to do that, and then be ruthless about keeping that block on there. But it's tough, and I think it's within each of our control as to how we manage that. But pushing back, setting those boundaries, and being really clear about what those boundaries are and communicating them is one way of grabbing that time back.
All right, well, Sabrina, thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.